Fate often writes its most surprising chapters in silence. To Diem, fragile and weak, never imagined that the very woman who once stood against her would be the one to save her life. A gentle hand, a quiet gesture, no words spoken, no recognition sought. And yet, when CEO Toan rushed to her side, his mother had already vanished into the shadows, leaving only warmth behind. Tu Diem fell ill. What was her reaction when she found out that the person who saved her was Toan's mother? Tears welled in her eyes. Gratitude, confusion, and pain collided within her heart. Was this an act of forgiveness, or just a fleeting moment of compassion? In that revelation, Tu Diem realized that love and hate within a family are never simple. They are bound by destiny, tangled in pride, and softened only by the quiet strength of a mother's heart. Tu Diem woke up that morning with her head spinning, her body weak, and her eyes darkening as if the world itself was collapsing around her. She tried to cook a simple bowl of rice porridge, hoping to eat a little and take her medicine, but her strength failed her. The last thing she remembered was the smell of boiling rice before her vision blurred and she collapsed onto the cold floor. When she regained consciousness, she was lying in bed, a cool damp towel resting gently on her burning forehead. Someone had lifted her. Someone had cared enough to place her there. But who? Her heart beat faster with confusion. She thought it might have been Toan, the man who always appeared when she needed him most. Yet when he arrived later, his face showed genuine shock. He had just walked in, and he swore he had not been there before. The mystery unsettled her. Tu Diem's thoughts circled endlessly. If it wasn't Toan, then who had touched her so gently? Who had left without a word? The truth, hidden behind silence, was that it had been Toan's mother. Though she had once opposed Diem, she could not leave the young woman lying helpless on the floor. She lifted Diem to bed, placed the cooling towel on her, and even considered cooking for her. But when she heard footsteps approaching, the footsteps of her son, she quietly slipped away. Pride and prejudice stopped her from staying, but compassion had driven her to act. Later, when Diem discovered this truth, her heart was torn between gratitude and disbelief. The very woman who had forbidden her love with Toan had been the one to save her in her most fragile moment. She felt warmth rise within her chest, yet also confusion. Why would Toan's mother help me in secret but deny me in the open? Her eyes filled with tears as she whispered to herself, perhaps, deep down, she does not hate me as much as she says. Perhaps, there is still hope. Tu Diem sat by the window of the small farmhouse, the bowl of porridge in her hands long forgotten as her thoughts raced. The revelation that it was Toan's mother who had saved her struck her heart like a whisper of hope and a wound at the same time. That evening, when Toan had gone to check on his workers at the construction site, Tu Diem gathered her courage and walked slowly to the city mansion where his family lived. She was weak, her steps unsteady, but the weight inside her chest pressed heavier than the fever in her body. When the door opened, she saw Toan's mother standing there. Their eyes met, one filled with hesitation, the other with silent pride. "Mother?" Tu Diem's voice trembled, the word unfamiliar on her tongue. "I know it was you. You were the one who helped me when I fainted. Why didn't you stay?" Toan's mother lowered her gaze, her hands tightening around the edge of her shawl. For a long moment, silence stretched between them, broken only by the faint sound of the clock ticking in the hall. Then she spoke, her tone softer than Diem had ever heard. "I could not let you suffer like that, child. But I also could not face my own son. I told myself I wanted to keep him away from you. Yet when I saw you on the floor, helpless, something inside me would not allow me to turn away." Tears welled into Diem's eyes. Gratitude surged through her, but so did pain. "If your heart has kindness for me, then why must you still reject me?" The older woman's lips trembled, her stern facade breaking for just a moment. "Because I fear losing my son. Because I fear that love may blind him, and pain may follow. But today, I realized perhaps I was the one blind." Tu Diem covered her mouth, unable to hold back a sob. In that fragile moment, something shifted between them, not acceptance, not yet, but the beginning of understanding. Unbeknownst to both, Toan had returned early and stood quietly at the edge of the hall. He heard every word, his heart swelling with both sorrow and hope. For the first time, he saw the two women he loved most in this world not as rivals, but as two souls struggling to protect the same thing, him. He stepped forward, his voice steady yet filled with emotion. "Mother Diem, perhaps it's time we stop fearing each other, and start believing in each other." The room fell silent, but it was no longer the silence of rejection, it was the silence of a new beginning. When Toan entered the quiet hospital room, he expected to find Diem resting. Instead, the bed was empty, the blanket folded neatly, and the scent of medicine still lingered in the air. Panic rose in his chest. He rushed to the nurse's station, demanding to know where Diem had gone. The nurse told him gently that she had been discharged earlier, escorted by an elderly woman. Toan froze. An elderly woman. His mind immediately thought of his mother, yet she had been away on errands that day or so he believed. Could it be her? Meanwhile, Diem walked slowly along the quiet street, her body still weak, but her heart heavier than ever. The revelation that it was Toan's mother who had quietly saved her gnawed at her soul. She recalled the woman's tender hands adjusting the blanket, her soft voice urging her to drink medicine, and the fleeting look of concern in her eyes. That same woman who once opposed her so fiercely, who doubted her existence in Toan's life, had been the one who protected her in her most vulnerable moment. Tears blurred her vision. Why would she do that for me? Diem whispered to herself. Was it guilt, compassion, or something deeper, a hidden recognition that Diem's love for Toan was true? When Toan finally found her sitting on a bench near the hospital gates, her eyes were red but shining with a mixture of sorrow and hope. He hurried to her side, kneeling before her. "Diem," he said, his voice raw with worry. "Why did you leave? You're still weak." She looked at him, her lips trembling. "Toan, I have to tell you something. The one who saved me. It wasn't just fate. It was your mother." Toan's heart pounded. For a moment, he was speechless. His mother, the same woman who had fought him over Diem, who doubted everything about her, she had quietly been the one to keep her safe. Diem continued, her voice breaking. "She didn't stay. She left when you came, as if she didn't want you to know. But I saw it in her eyes. She cared, even if she couldn't say it. And now, I don't know what to believe anymore." Toan gently held her hands, his eyes filled with determination. "Then believe this, Diem, if my mother saved you, it means there's still a chance. Maybe her heart is softer than we thought, and I promise you I'll make sure she never has to hide her kindness again." At that moment, Diem felt a fragile but undeniable seed of hope take root in her heart. For the first time, she wondered if perhaps the love she and Toan shared could not only survive, but also heal the wounds that divided his family. That night, as the city lights flickered outside the tall windows of Toan's home, Madame Lan sat alone in her private room. She had returned from the hospital in silence, hiding her trembling hands within the folds of her shawl. No one knew that she had been there, watching over Diem while her son was away. No one knew how much it had cost her pride to sit beside the young woman she had once judged so harshly. Her mind replayed the image of Diem's fragile figure, drenched in sweat, whispering faint words in her sleep. In that moment, Lan had seen not an intruder threatening her family's honor, but a girl abandoned, fighting to survive, clinging to life with a strength that was both heartbreaking and admirable. "Why do you move me so, child?" Lan whispered into the emptiness. "Why does your pain echo in my heart?" Meanwhile, Diem rested in the guest room of Toan's house. She could not sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the face of Lan, the very woman who had once doubted her, now revealed as her savior. Confusion and gratitude tangled inside her chest. She wanted to thank Lan, to kneel before her, and confess how much that kindness meant, yet she feared rejection all over again. Toan entered quietly, carrying a tray of warm tea. His eyes softened when he saw her awake, staring blankly at the ceiling. "You're thinking about her, aren't you?" he asked gently. Diem nodded, her voice barely a whisper. Your mother. Why would she do that for me? She doesn't accept me. She doesn't believe in me. Yet she saved me, Toan. She saved me, and left without saying a word. Toan sat beside her, taking her hand into his. His touch was steady, firm, yet filled with tenderness. Because deep down, she's not as unfeeling as she pretends. My mother is proud, yes, but she's also human. She saw you not as the girl she disapproved of, but as a soul in need. That means there's hope, Diem. Hope that she can see what I've seen in you all along. Diem's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. But what if she never accepts me? What if I'm only a passing shadow in your life? A burden she can't forgive? Toan cupped her face, his gaze unwavering. Then I will fight for you until her heart changes. Because you are not a shadow, Diem. You are my light. And I refuse to let anyone, family or fate, take you away from me. At that moment, standing quietly by the door, unseen by both, was Madame Lan herself. She had come to check on Diem one last time, but what she overheard pierced through the walls she had built around her heart. Toan's words, fierce yet tender, echoed in her soul. And for the first time, Lan felt the weight of her own pride begin to crack. The story of Tu Diem Toan and his mother teaches us that love and compassion can soften even the hardest of hearts. At first, Madame Lan was blinded by her pride and fear of losing control over her family. She judged Diem without truly seeing her struggles. Yet when faced with Diem's vulnerability, her humanity overcame her prejudice. This reminds us that kindness does not always come with words or grand gestures. It can be silent, hidden, and unexpected. Sometimes the greatest act of love is done quietly, without asking for recognition. From Toan, we learn the value of loyalty and courage. He stood by Diem even when circumstances and family ties seemed to pull them apart. True love is not just about affection. It is about protection, trust, and the determination to fight for someone's place in your life. From Diem, we see resilience and humility. Despite pain and rejection, she never let bitterness consume her. Instead, she recognized and cherished even the smallest spark of kindness shown to her. Together, their journey teaches us that acceptance may take time, and hearts may take longer to change, but with patience, sincerity, and unwavering love, even the deepest barriers can be broken. The lesson is clear. Never underestimate the power of quiet compassion, and never give up on love that is genuine.